Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is Jason Gilbert from msdynamicsworld.com, and we're here for a session with a really interesting topic. Should you move from Dynamics GP to Dynamics 365? Our presenters today are Eric Newell, Rich Studer, and Scott Frappier from Stoneridge Software. It's great to have them with us. I just want to remind folks we do want to keep today's session interactive and take your questions. You can enter them at any point into the Q&A block you should see to the right of the main presentation area. I know our team will be making time for those questions. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand things off to Eric Newell to start us off.
Thank you, Jason. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So our topic for today is should you move from Dynamics GP to Dynamics 365, and we as the Stoneridge team are going to share some feedback and ideas around is this the right time for you to make that move. So what we're going to cover today in the next hour is we're going to first do a little introduction of Stoneridge and our team members who will be presenting. Then we'll talk about some of the indications that you may have outgrown Dynamics GP from a functionality standpoint. We're going to introduce you to Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Financials, how that might be a potential option, and then also Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Operations. So we'll do a demo of each of those, showing off a few of the highlights of the capabilities within the Dynamics 365 platform. And then we'll also talk a little bit about what are some of the options that you can do to transition from Dynamics GP to either Dynamics 365 for Financials or Operations. And as we go along today, we are happy to take any questions that you have. So as Jason said, if you can put them in the Q&A window. So those of us who aren't talking will be helping answer questions. And if we see something pop up in the Q&A window that we think is a really good question to share with the entire participant list, we will go ahead and read that question off and provide that answer as we go along. So again, feel free to put questions in the Q&A window along with the presenters. Dan Liebel from our team, who's a senior consultant who recently made the switch from Dynamics GP to Dynamics 365, is here as well. So he's happy to answer any questions that you might have as we go through it. So with that, we'll get started. So first, a little bit about Stoneridge Software. So Stoneridge Software is a team built on a significant amount of experience with Microsoft Dynamics. We've got over half of our folks have worked at Microsoft at one point in the Dynamics support world. We've got a significant experience in the partner channel as well, and we'll introduce a few folks who have been doing this for 15 plus years. We are a Microsoft Gold ERP partner, so we achieved the highest level of status from an ERP partner standpoint. We pride ourselves on the methodology that we use. We use something called an iterative methodology, which allows for a process design that gives us the ability to leverage best practices and reduce the amount of customizations that are needed when you're implementing a solution like Dynamics 365. We're also big players in the Dynamics communities world, so you may have seen us before at an AXUG or a NavUG event. We present a lot at the user group summits, and we'll be presenting again here in October. Always happy to meet with folks there and answer questions as we get a chance to meet people in person. Now, one of the bigger honors for us as an organization is we were named the best place to work in Minnesota in 2015, and we've consistently been named a best place to work. So that's a big honor, and we've got a great, enthusiastic team who's ready to help people out. We've also been named a top professional services firm. So through the Service Performance Insight, we've been named a top professional services firm for or part of their Best of the Best group for the past 2 years running. We're a very value-driven organization, so we believe strongly in the values that we founded the company on, which are integrity, technical excellence, tenacity, client-centric, and enjoying our work. So you'll see that within the folks that you work with within our team. They're going to be have that deep technical excellence that you need in order to get a solution deployed and the tenacity to make sure it's going to get done right. We're a team of 76 people located primarily in the upper Midwest. We've got offices in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and near Fargo, North Dakota as well. So that's a little bit about Stoneridge Software. About me, I'm the CEO of Stoneridge Software and founder. Started the company about 4.5 years ago. Prior to that, I spent 13 years at Microsoft, and I spent about 6 years on the Microsoft Dynamics GP side, about 3 years as a support engineer, and then was one of the premier support account managers for a number of years as well. I've presented at Convergence about 15 times, so if you're longtime GP people, you may have seen me at Convergence in the past. So that's a little bit about me. I also want to introduce the folks who will be presenting with me today. So we've got Rich Studer and Scott Frappier. So Rich, if you want to introduce yourself. So if Rich is having trouble getting off mute there, Rich is a sales executive with Stoneridge Software. He joined us last year after spending about 15 years in the Dynamics channel serving as a GP practice manager. And he's focused on the Dynamics 365 for financials and NAV side of the business. So he'll be talking through the Dynamics 365 for financials options today. I'd also like to introduce Scott Frappier, who's a senior architect here at Stoneridge.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I've actually been in the channel now for about 14 years. Role-wise, I've had many different roles. I've been a developer, project manager, and vice president at a previous organization. And my role at Stoneridge Software is senior architect, and I do a lot of the pre-sales demonstrations for both Dynamics 365 for financials and for operations. So it's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Now with that out of the way, we'll jump into the main event here. So first question is, we'll start off with the idea of, have you outgrown Dynamics GP, or when do you know the Dynamics GP isn't the right fit for you anymore? And I worked with the Microsoft Dynamics World team and put out a document about a week ago, a blog article out there, and one of the misnomers that people have about outgrowing GP is they think it's a transaction volume issue, but it really has to do more with the functionality and having some additional functionality needs in Dynamics 365 for financials or operations that aren't in the Dynamics 365 for GP core application stack. So first, I want to talk a little bit about some of the pros of Dynamics GP. Again, I'm a Dynamics GP fan, used it for many years, supported it for many years at Microsoft. And a few things about Dynamics GP. So first off, it's a rock-solid solution. It's been out there since the early 90s. It uses SQL Server for reporting, data fixing. So if you know SQL Server very well, there's a lot of things you can do with Dynamics GP. It's easy to set up and configure. You can get going with Dynamics GP relatively quickly. Also, there's over 28,000 users of Dynamics GP in the U.S., so there's a pretty extensive network of other users and partners, and there's a lot of great third-party tools that allow you to get data in and out, do account combinations, all sorts of different tools that are well-developed and very mature in the Dynamics GP space. So those are definitely positives about Dynamics GP. But some of the pain points that you may be experiencing on Dynamics GP is because Dynamics GP is more of a two-tier architecture where it's straight client to database, you don't have that business logic layer, which gives you more flexibility around security, developing customizations. So that business logic layer isn't present within Dynamics GP like in other products. Some of the flexibility on the chart of accounts, GP, when you set up a new account, you've got to set it up in all of your different departments. Within Dynamics 365, you've got what's called financial dimensions, which allows you to be able to create profit and loss statements across customers, across any variety of departments and cost centers. You basically have an unlimited set of accounts that you can leverage in the Dynamics 365 space. And GP was designed with very limited inventory, warehouse, and production capabilities. So again, it's got capability there, but really if you're trying to leverage any advanced functionality there, GP is not going to fit you there. The integration with GP a lot of times is driven through SQL SSIS, whereas it doesn't have that native integration layer like some of the other products do. If you do want to use it in the cloud, there are partner-hosted options, but not Microsoft-hosted options. There's not a SaaS model for Dynamics GP. International support, so Dynamics GP was built in Fargo, North Dakota as primarily a U.S. or English-speaking only solution. So while you can use it in UK, Australia, they do have some French and Spanish versions, but it really wasn't built for international support. So if you're a company that's got multiple locations, Dynamics GP is going to have some limited capability there. And also the ability to do intercompany. Again, it exists in Dynamics GP, but it exists more in the financials layer. So if you're a company that's got transactions that are happening between different entities, especially in like production or warehousing opportunity, it's going to be pretty burdensome to be able to make those transitions within Dynamics GP. So there's also some scalability factors. Dynamics 365 for operations in particularly was built to scale to a multi-billion-dollar company type of load on the system, whereas Dynamics GP wasn't built for that. Dynamics GP does scale well based on the ability to configure SQL and make that work, but it does take a lot of work to get it to scale to extreme levels as well. So when people ask me if the right time to move off of Dynamics GP, I really think about 5 things in particular. So one, if you're a manufacturer, Dynamics GP is not a great solution for you. Both Dynamics 365 for financials and Dynamics 365 for operations have considerably more functionality in manufacturing than Dynamics GP is. So if you're on GP and you're a manufacturer, really is a good time to consider making the upgrade and being able to take advantage of some additional functionality. Certainly if you're into a process or lean manufacturing, there's not capability for that within Dynamics GP, so you'd be looking at Dynamics 365 for operations if you do any kind of process manufacturing, or if you want to leverage some of the lean concepts. If you have international sites, again, those international sites, if they need their own language, they need currency transactions to be happening, or even if you need a multiple site deployment model, none of those are possible with Dynamics GP. So if you're using multiple sites or have plans to grow internationally, Dynamics GP isn't the best solution for that. If you have considerable intercompany transactions, again, if you're doing operations where you have things happening at a subledger level where you're interacting between different companies, Dynamics GP wasn't built for that, whereas Dynamics 365 for operations was and has that capability to make those kind of transactions. Again, if you're in the distribution space, Dynamics GP has inventory functionality, but advanced serialization capabilities, advanced warehousing. If you're in GP and you want to add on barcode scanning, that's a third-party solution. It's native within Dynamics 365 for operations. So if you have some advanced needs on the distribution side, if you're a serious distributor, then GP probably doesn't keep up with the functionality that you need. And the other thought is, depending on the size and complexity of your IT staff, if you don't have the IT team to support it, Dynamics 365 for financials is a SaaS-based solution which has very limited interaction from an IT standpoint. Dynamics 365 for operations is a more infrastructure as a service type play. So if you do have, so that dramatically decreases the amount of work your IT team needs to do to be able to maintain it. So if you don't have SQL and IT capabilities on staff, you're going to be better off looking at a solution like one of the Dynamics 365 for financials or operations solutions. So with that, I'll jump into an introduction to the Microsoft Dynamics platform. So this is really how Microsoft is looking at the platform of the business solutions in the future. So it really sees Dynamics 365 not as the only solution, but a part of the overall picture. So on the left, you've got Office. So Microsoft Office is very well ingrained in all the Dynamics 365 solutions. We'll start our demo today from showing you the interoperability that that you have within Outlook. But also Microsoft has made some major investments in the past few years and is bringing those to the table as components of the Dynamics 365 for Business platform. So there's Power BI. If you've seen Power BI, it's a set of dashboards and a very flexible business intelligence system that you can even ask questions of to find your data. It's been amazing. The customers that we've worked with this on, projects that used to take a couple hundred hours to do from a BI standpoint can be done very quickly with Power BI. Cortana Intelligence, Azure, Internet of Things, other major investments Microsoft's made in artificial intelligence and automated processing. Then you get to the Dynamics 365 space, and as you may have heard, Dynamics 365 really comes in two different varieties. So there's Dynamics 365 for Business, and that includes Dynamics 365 for Financials and some CRM components. And then Dynamics 365 for Enterprise, which includes Dynamics 365 for Operations, as well as the full suite of Dynamics CRM functionality. So within the Dynamics 365 for Enterprise or for Business, you've got the full complement of capabilities across sales, purchasing, project management, inventory, financials, manufacturing, and they're all integrated together into one solution that will work well for you as a business. So on top of that, you've got the Microsoft App Source, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end today, which is a marketplace where you can get add-on solutions, third-party solutions. You can also add your customizations to the solution, as well as leverage the application platform, which includes something called the Common Data Model, which is a tool that allows you to communicate data between Office and CRM and Dynamics 365 for Financials. You've also got the ability to create mobile apps very quickly using Power Apps, and Flow is a solution that you can use to build some simple workflows to interact with your data. And these all work across Office, Dynamics 365, any customizations you build, and any apps that you might download as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce Rich Studer, and he's going to talk a little bit about Dynamics 365 for Financials.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Apologize for the audio issues before. I'm going to talk a little bit about Dynamics 365 for Financials. It was released last November, which was really exciting to me personally. I've been in the Microsoft channel since about 2001, and I've been waiting for a very long time for a true SaaS multi-tenant solution. So I was very excited last November when this was released. And so far I've been very impressed with the product. It combines robust feature functionality with an integration to Office 365 that Eric was just mentioning. It really creates a unique offering that really truly blends together productivity with process. Okay, so what is Dynamics 365 for Financials? As I just mentioned, it is a true multi-tenant SaaS product. It is only available in a cloud deployment. So unlike GP, there is no on-prem or private cloud deployment available for it. Dynamics 365 is also based on NAV, Dynamics NAV functionality. So this isn't a brand new product. This has been a product that, from a features functionality standpoint, has been available for a while, and it has really fully leveraged the robust feature set of NAV. It's also important to note that going forward, Dynamics NAV and Dynamics 365 for Financials will have separate development paths or roadmaps. Okay. With Dynamics 365 for Financials, you get a single comprehensive solution. It's a fully rounded out package. It includes functionality for financial management, inventory management, sales, purchasing, project management, multi-company, multi-currency, document management. Again, being based on Dynamics NAV, you're getting a very robust feature functionality set right from the start. Okay. What's really cool with Dynamics NAV, with Dynamics 365 for Financials, is how it's integrated with Office 365. This is very, very cool. You have the ability to create quotes and invoices directly from Outlook. So starting from Outlook, starting from an email, you can pull product details and quantities from a customer's email, input some additional information into a quote template directly in Outlook, and then email that quote. And this just takes minutes. There's no flipping back and forth between applications going from email over to your financial management system. So it really saves time. You can also view real-time customer and vendor history right from Outlook. So if you get an email from a customer or from a vendor, you can click on an Insights button and immediately see information from your ERP system without going to that ERP system. And Scott Frappier is going to show part of that in a couple minutes here. In addition to the Outlook capabilities, you also are able to utilize Excel to pull information live from Dynamics 365 for Financials. So you can view information, update information, edit, and view it. For example, you could be looking at a customer list in Excel, and maybe you want to update terms codes for a bunch of those customers. You can do that right from within the Excel spreadsheet, make that update in the appropriate cell, and then publish those changes back to Financials as long as you have the appropriate security access. Okay, and then extending the power of Dynamics 365 with AppSource and Power Apps. Eric had briefly mentioned that capability with Power Apps, the ability to customize and create your own applications and use those with Dynamics 365, and then having AppSource available. And AppSource is really going to build out the functionality, especially from a vertical functionality standpoint. I know of one partner that's building out a subscription invoicing and deferred revenue application right now for Dynamics 365. So having AppSource is really going to augment and add to your functionality that you need to run your business. Okay? Automating processes. With Dynamics 365, you have core approval workflows for purchase documents, sales documents, payment journals, customer codes, or customer cards. They're all available. So with a purchase document or a customer card that needs to be approved by someone else in the organization, you can set that approval request to be part of a workflow. And based on how that workflow is set up, the appropriate approver is then notified, and you can walk that process through as well as record the audit trail of that approval process. In addition to the core approval workflow, Eric also mentioned Flow. Flow allows you to further streamline processes and create automated workflows between other apps like Yammer, Facebook, or Twitter. For example, you could post on Yammer when a new inventory item is created, or you can send an email to your customer when their credit limit has been updated. So some really cool things that extend the functionality outside of Dynamics 365. Okay, getting started quickly. Dynamics 365 is built in the cloud. There's no installation, no infrastructure, no working with your IT group to provision a server or set up a virtual machine. Then there's the assisted configuration wizards that allow you to set up financials very quickly. You kind of hit the ground running utilizing the configuration wizards. And then lastly, for migrating your data, there are what are called the rapid implementation tool available, which provides templates to migrate your data. And then you even have an app on AppSource that allows you to migrate your GP master data and opening balances over. Okay. Again, since you're able to access information utilizing Excel and Outlook, you get a really familiar look and feel to the application. Having that look and feel is going to really rapidly speed up the user adoption. They're getting a system that feels and looks like Outlook, and so it's going to be easier to use and adopt. Okay? And then mobility. Mobility is very key today. You have remote workers working from home, traveling, out and about, and it's important for them to stay connected. Microsoft has really truly embraced this mobility, to the point now where you have the ability to interact with Dynamics 365 via your workstation, a tablet, laptop, or your phone. And it also works on multiple platforms. And we're talking Windows, iOS, and the Android platform. So Microsoft, again, has really truly embraced this, that you can now use this on multiple platforms. Okay. It's important for every ERP system to capture transactions and facilitate processes. But even more importantly is turning that data into actionable information. Dynamics 365 comes with dashboard capabilities to provide the information that's key to your role. You have that necessary information to effectively do your job. It also includes dimensions. So dimensions are a little different from what you're used to in a traditional chart of account number from the GP side. Dimensions really make it easier to slice and dice and analyze your information across subledgers and your financials. And lastly, you can also create custom dashboards utilizing Power BI. Power BI is really that visualization tool that brings your data all into one place, and even creating interactive dashboards to view that data. Okay, and lastly, before we get into the demo, I'm going to talk about a few points on pricing. First off, it's a monthly subscription. It includes annual enhancement. There's no hosting or infrastructure fees. It's just one price. And it's based on a per user, per month, named user basis. So it's important to remember that these named users are not concurrent users like they are in GP. These are named users. So whoever needs access to Dynamics 365 must be set up as a named user. Okay. Lastly, a full user comes in at $40, and that gives you full processing capabilities within the system. There's a team user. I included that chart for you to look at later so you know the difference between a team user and a full user. But a team user is considered a limited user. You can do read and write, or I mean read any reports, run any reports, and you have limited update capabilities. There's an external accountant license that you can use. So if you have an external accounting firm doing your books or interacting with you, that's at no charge. And then lastly, there's a sales user that's going to be available in May. So for only an additional $10, you can add Microsoft Dynamics CRM functionality. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Frappier, and Scott's going to do a quick demo on the functionality of Dynamics 365. He's going to give you a little taste of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich. Hopefully everyone can hear me. If not, please post something in the question and answer area. I'm just going to move this over real quick so that we can see my entire screen. So, you know, we've talked about the integration that we have with Office 365, and I saw one of the questions that was an EDI-related question as well. I just wanted you to know that, you know, we do have that capability as well for managing EDI within Dynamics 365 as well. But the net result is that within the stack is what we call it. We've gone through and basically made it so that the solution integrates across a lot of these different Microsoft products. And it provides a lot of rich functionality in the solution. And the example I wanted to show is I've got a quote that I created for a specific customer. His name is Andy Teal, and you can see right here that I actually have a quote that was generated from Dynamics 365 for financials with the total amount that was due. And you can see that Andy actually went through and replied and said, yeah, I want to move forward with that. So with that, there's a couple of new features that have been added into Outlook on Office 365 that allow for us to actually interact with the ERP application inside of the actual Outlook application instead of having to go classically to another website or something else like that to gain access. And you'll see a couple of buttons have been added. So here we have our financials button that was added, and then up at the top here, we also have another Dynamics 365 button that was added. So if I click on my financials button here, for example, what happens is it actually brings me to this customer's information. So we'll actually log in, and very quickly we can see this is the Canon Group, this is the actual customer number that was on that quote. I can see what the receivable balances are. I can also do a couple of cool things from here. I can actually go through and create a quote or an invoice or an order from within Outlook itself. So if I wanted to create a new sales quote, I can click on the button Create New Quote, and then the system will actually populate the information because we know what the email address is that's related to this contact. And from here, I can quickly go through and then add items. So if I do a Paris chair, and then I can go locations, put my quantity maybe of 4 or 5 that's on here, and then I can also take this, and if I want to, I can send it via email, so then we've got obviously a quote that's been sent out to a customer. So I never had to actually leave this entire process when I went through it. What I can also do, though, is I can go, for example, to my contact insights over here. And this is, once again, a very similar view. It's just showing some of the detail information for balances, and it's in a different type of a pane, so that way you can see it off to the right while you're interacting within Outlook. From here, what I can also do is I can go to my outgoing sales quotes. I can go through and then select one. Here's the one that we just created, remember, but I can take this one, for example, and what I can do is I can actually go through and convert this into an order like the customer requested. So right here inside of Outlook, I'm actually able to go through and then do all these actions to convert a quote to an order, or to look up customer information very quickly and effectively without having to leave the actual Outlook application. So other areas I wanted to highlight too, so that's the rich integration that we have with Outlook. If I go to my main menu here, so you can see in Office 365, you've probably seen this before, the app bar where we have all the different apps that you can actually integrate with. Dynamics 365 is one of those, and this actually occurs on Dynamics 365 for financials or Dynamics 365 for operations. And when I click on that, what it does is it actually brings me to our Dynamics 365 homepage. And you can see I've got a couple of apps that I can add to it, and I'll show you this one in just a second. But here's the Dynamics 365 for Financials application. When I click on this, you're going to see a very familiar look and feel as I log into the actual application. This is our role center that we have within the application. And you'll see there are common threads that are actually used inside of here that are in Office 365 as well. So I have my queues up at the top here that are showing me what work I actually need to do inside of the environment. I've got some quick information as well. I can see what my sales orders are, and you can see as I hover over these aspects that it actually goes through and updates the information. If I want to, I can actually go through and then show my ribbon bar as well, which is hidden by default. I mean, it's just very familiar for many users if they've used any of the actual Microsoft products in the past. Other aspects in here I wanted to highlight, so we've talked about Power BI, and the stack is really changing in terms of how customers interact within the application. So Power BI, it used to be when you actually went through an ERP application that you'd actually have to go through another implementation of BI. I've gone through a couple with Hyperion and Business Objects. But natively now, we have the capability to query these transactional elements and actually represent them within Power BI itself. So what I can do here is I can actually go through very quickly and expand this Power BI report that I've created that could look into the ERP system, which would be Dynamics 365 for Financials, but you could also use other sources of information to represent KPIs and information regarding that specific attribute that you're looking at. So if I click, for example, on Van Ansel, we'll see then that we actually have regional map information that updates based off of this information that's being fed into the system. So it allows for you to really create and tailor these BI attributes as needed to really satisfy kind of what you're looking for from a KPI measurement. You can also, in some of these KPIs, actually go through and then drill into the information. So what I did here is I actually went through and I just clicked on the sales order, and you'll see here's the actual sales order that we had before for the same amount that we converted from a quote into an order in the system for that Athens desk. So I'm very easily able to get to that information and interact with it. I'm actually going to close out of this, and the last thing I really wanted to show you guys is the Dynamics 365, how you can expand it beyond just the financials aspect. So, you know, in ERP solutions, you've heard of the horror stories, you know, of going through a customization. We don't have those types of pain points, generally speaking. What that means is if I go back to Dynamics 365 for Financials, for example, I created a quick app that took me about 5 minutes to do, where I wanted customer information to be able to be displayed on a mobile device. I wanted it to be on a phone, or I wanted it to be on a tablet, or even in a web browser. And right here, this app was actually created in Power Apps, which is also integrated with Dynamics 365 for Financials. When I click on this Power App, what's going to happen here is it's actually going to go through and it's going to render it as a phone, because that's what I designed it as. And you can see the name that I specified up here is Dynamics 365 for Financials, the actual customer list. And what this system is actually doing right here is it's actually going through and then querying the customer information and displaying this on the screen. This didn't require any programming or customizations into the ERP system to do this, into Financials. I just went through through and set up a screen and said I want it to look like a customer and I want to query the customer data for that. And you can see as I go through here, I can get to additional information. I can delete a customer. I can go through then and edit the customer if I want to, and then change values inside of here as well. So it allows for you to really go through and make changes as needed without making changes to the actual system very effectively and easily. And lastly, what I can do is if I go back to Dynamics 365, I can go back to Financials, and this is the home screen that I interact with. That's it for the Financials demo at this point.
Great. Well, I'll jump back in, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about Dynamics 365 for operations. Sure my screen is being shown here. So let's talk a little bit about Dynamics 365 for operations. But before I jump into that, John asked a very good question on the chat window. He asked, so I'm hearing about Dynamics 365 for financials or Dynamics 365 for operations. I'm a manufacturer. I need both financials and manufacturing. Well, Microsoft has challenged us as partners a little bit with the naming of Dynamics 365. So just to clarify, Dynamics 365 for financials is a full ERP business suite. So it does include financials, manufacturing, project accounting, all of those core elements of the solution, and I have a comparison chart I'll show you at the end, as well as Dynamics 365 for operations includes financials, project accounting, production, warehousing, all of those components are included in them as well. So just to clarify, Dynamics 365 for financials, Dynamics 365 for operations are both full ERP solutions that have financials, manufacturing, etc. So thank you for that question. It is a confusing thing based on the way that they are named. So let's talk a little bit about Dynamics 365 for operations. So this is Microsoft's really flagship ERP product that's focused on the mid-market, also on the enterprise as well. You know, at my days in Microsoft, I was the North America manager for Premier Field Engineering, and we were working with customers like Dell and General Motors, and so you've got this Dynamics AX or Dynamics 365 solution in some very large enterprises. It offers flexible deployment options, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, that you can do cloud, on-premise, or hybrid. It was formerly known, so it was launched last February as Dynamics AX7 or Dynamics AX or the new Dynamics AX. It's really the 7th version of the Dynamics AX evolution. And it includes all, and I put an asterisk there because not every single thing, but virtually all of Dynamics AX 2012 functionality. So there were a couple minor things that were deprecated. Otherwise, all that functionality that you had in Dynamics AX 2012 is there, plus additional capability as well. So Microsoft spent 5 years with 1,500 developers working on this solution. It's a very capable solution overall. So when we think about Dynamics 365 for operations, one of the taglines we have is reimagine your ERP. So think about how an ERP can operate differently than it does today. It's not some old limited functionality thing you've got a closet downstairs in a server room. This is a cloud-based solution that allows you to interact with the system on your computer, on a tablet, on a mobile phone. It provides information, or provides a lifecycle services solution that allows you to integrate the way you do things with standard business processes. You also have the ability to import data from various different systems, and you've got a very flexible services infrastructure to build integrations to other systems as well. So as you can see on the bottom there, it includes functionality across the scope of the ERP, from retail, procurement, supply chain, production, finance, HR, payroll, the capability of doing extensions, and then all of the investments Microsoft is making in the cloud around machine learning, Internet of Things, big data, integration platforms. It really is a very comprehensive solution that Microsoft has brought to the table for the operations side of it. So as I mentioned, there are 3 different deployment types for Dynamics 365 for operations. the cloud, which is more of an infrastructure as a service type of a play where you have an instance and you can have multiple instances in Azure that you can use to manage your test environments, production environments, etc. It's all supported by Microsoft, backed up and managed by Microsoft from an infrastructure standpoint. So you've got the power of the cloud, the security of the cloud is available as well there. You have a unique option called a Cloud Plus Edge, which is a hybrid deployment. So you've got a centralized system in Azure, which is your master data, and then you've got the ability to do individual local on-premise implementations, or installations, I should say. So let's say you're a manufacturer and you've got a site in Tennessee and you've got a site in Singapore and Belgium. You can actually have an instance in Singapore, an instance in Belgium, instance in Tennessee, and all of those things would flow together, and the data would be aggregated into your cloud instance. You could also then push down any customizations to each of those different sites. So this is a very awesome opportunity that Microsoft is providing for those customers, especially if they have multiple locations that they want to be able to service. The Cloud Plus Edge is truly a cutting-edge opportunity. And then you also have the local business data or on-premise solution again. So if you made a big investment in a data center, or you're an existing customer on Dynamics AX 2009 or 2012 and you want to keep things in your data center, you can definitely do that by upgrading to Dynamics 365 and leaving it in an on-premise state. There are a couple services that Microsoft provides from the cloud, like lifecycle services, but they aren't transactional, so you can still run your business locally even if you get disconnected from the cloud. So if you're in a remote area, like a few of our prospects are in more remote areas and they're worried about the internet connectivity, so local business data is a good option for you if you're concerned about that. So just to give you a sense, I won't spend a lot of time on what the pricing is, but there's a monthly subscription option for both online and on-premise. Again, like Dynamics 365 for financials, it includes annual enhancement if you do the cloud option, no hosting or infrastructure fees, and named users as well. But generally, if you're going to do it on a cloud version, your enterprise users who have access to everything in the system are at $190 a user a month. Activity, which is kind of generally accomplishing one particular function, that's a new license option that just came out. Last week it'll be about $50 a user a month. You have the ability for team members who just record time or do HR self-service, which is $8 a month. And then you also have a device license option. So if you have multiple people using one device, you can just license that device instead of the individual users. And then if you go with the on-premise solution, it's a little bit cheaper because there's not the hosting that's provided by Microsoft, and you can buy that either on a subscription basis or you can buy it on a perpetual basis like you've bought Dynamics GP in the past, where you pay up front for your licenses. And then we'll talk a little bit about how would you transition from GP to Dynamics 365 for operations in just a minute. But I want to give Scott Verpeer the chance to come back again and show you a little bit about how Dynamics 365 for operations works.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Okay. It's always fun to do demos. So this screen, as you can see, is just a little bit different than what we were looking at before. So this is the Dynamics 365 for Operations product. And as I know there's probably a little bit of confusion between what is financials and operations. I know the team has kind of spoke to it, but just imagine that they're two different requirements in terms of capabilities that they have for solutions in ERP. Some businesses will use financials, some will use operations. And you can see, though, that the look and feel is fairly similar in terms of the actual layout. So right here, I'm actually at my dashboard, and I'm an administrator inside of operations. And what I've done is I've actually gone through and then tailored this just to show specific workspaces that I actually interact with within the product. So you can see I've got a customers credit and collections workspace. And so if you are actually part of the collections activities within your business, this is generally then where you would work inside of the environment. And you can actually go through and tailor these to have as many many as you want or as few as you want in order to satisfy kind of what your business role is inside of your organization. So if I go to customers and collections, for example, I'm just going to click on this to show you. We can see that we have a bunch of different activities inside of the workspace that we interact with. Just like in Dynamics 365 for financials, we have our tiles or cues that we interact with. And the cool thing about these is that, you know, we're used to kind of looking at systems and printing out reports and then interacting with those reports. Well, with Dynamics 365, it's designed to be more paperless so that you can get to that information very quickly. And what we can do here is, as you can see, we have numbers that are representing, excuse me, what the actual quantity of items that we need to address inside of the solution. You can imagine it as paper stacks. I always do the paper file folder thing that you're going through and moving based upon the status. That's what the intent of these are. Just like in Dynamics 365 for financials, we have all this extended information that we can drill into. And inside of the workspace, we then have lists that we can interact with. So here's my collections list. I can very quickly get to notes for customers. I can also on the far right here interact with links, reports, and any of the setup that's really required with it. Some of the key areas I wanted to show, first off, let's go into inventory management real quick. Because what I want to show is not only do we have just the static lists and then all these different types of tiles that we interact with, we also have Power BI inside of Dynamics 365 for operations as well. So we can create these very rich visualizations that really represent where you are in terms of what your KPIs are that you're tracking inside of your environment. What we can also do is we can actually link Power BI reports inside of here as well. So if I click on my procurement analysis report here, what we'll see is additional information regarding what our procurement aspect is, what our spend overview is. If I go to my discounts, I can see the regions of these discounts. And this information can look either on-prem or in the cloud for data to represent what those KPIs are that you're actually managing. And lastly, what I can do in the top right here is if I have Power BI, I can actually go through then and then open that and interact with it within Power BI. This once again talks to that stack is what we call it, integrating and being useful for us as our daily processing needs. If I close out of this real quick, another feature I wanted to cover was the fact that, you know, when you're doing an ERP implementation, business processes are hard to train, right? I mean, you create this user documentation, you put it on SharePoint, and you hope that when somebody starts that you reference that for them to know how to do a specific process. Well, in Dynamics 365 for operations, we have a built-in help system that actually has what we call task guides that are set up inside of the system. And these task guides allow for you to go through and model what your business process is and then use that as part of a standard, or as part of kind of a workflow inside of your environment. So an example of this is we've got a bunch that come out of the box. There's about 1,000 different process flows that we can leverage. And what I wanted to show is the really cool factor in terms of this is what I can do to actually train somebody without actually having to have them go to a SharePoint document to get the information. So you can see, you know, just like in all help, right, we've got all the different steps that we can do with it. But here's where we differentiate ourselves. So what I'm doing is I'm actually going through and starting this task guide. You'll see my screen change just a little bit. On the top here, I've got a little action I need to do. So it's telling me go to inventory management, setup, and go to my inventory and warehouse management parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the task guide. I'm going to go to my inventory management, and I'm going to go to my inventory management warehouse parameters. And I'm going to click on that. And you'll see that the system is going through and guiding me on what I need to do next. So if I click on locations, it's now telling me populate this information. So examples of this are, let's say that you actually have a purchase order that you want to create, and you've never created a purchase order inside of the system. What you can do is you can actually record a task guide for what your business process is, or reuse the existing one that comes out of the box and then modify it, and then give it to the user so that they can actually go through this process without ever having to look at a document inside of the system. So that's a really cool feature that I've seen a lot of different customers use. Other areas I wanted to show just to highlight, once again, this stack concept is in our master planning capabilities. Now, I'm not going to go through, the production orders and go through all the different list screens, but what I do want to highlight is a capability called machine learning. And this is a concept that's getting more traction, and it's kind of the future in terms of what we're going to use in terms of getting machines to actually figure out some of the common data points that we need to interact with. It's never a replacement for a human being at this point, but what it does allow for you to do is do some statistical analysis of your data. So an example of that is here. I'm looking at a demand forecast that I generated within Azure Machine Learning, and all I did is I took my item history from 2012 to 2015, and you can see the data down here at the bottom, and sent that to Azure Machine Learning, where it ran an algorithm against it to try to figure out what is the actual seasonality or trend with this particular product. And you can see in here that there's a model that was used. It's called an STL model, which means seasonality. And when I ran this process, you can see that every July we have a little bit of a dip inside of this product demand. And you can see in the model over here, so this is the future demand that was created, that there's also small dips inside of July for that information. You can also see what we call a confidence factor with it. So when I'm hovering over this, you'll see this top line and bottom line that are kind of lightly blue shaded. This is where the statistical analysis looked at it and said, hey, it could be this high or it could be this low. And you can also very quickly see manual changes that were made to the forecast that may have been made by a human being because they have some other information that wasn't pushed out to the machine learning capability. And we can see up here it's represented in bold inside of the system to say, hey, I've gone through and made a manual change. I feel that there's going to be 50,000 units of this particular part that I'm actually going to be selling as part of my process. So this is a capability that I see a lot of customers really enjoying because they can do a lot of this modeling within the system without having to export to Excel and create their forecasts. Some of the other aspects too that Eric highlighted, one of them is that, this is a multi-company solution, obviously. And in a lot of software solutions, when you change companies, there's not that rich integration between them. If you want to create a purchase order in one company and then have it actually create a sales order in another, you've got to manually go through both systems and do that. Well, in this system, we don't have to worry about that. So I'm actually going to close out, and I've focused on USRT, and you can see I've got a little bit of a different look and feel inside of this company. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into my purchase orders. So if I go to my purchase order preparation workspace right here, and I look at my all purchase orders, for example, we see a bunch of purchase orders that are at the bottom here that have been created. But this purchase order is actually a requirement from an actual intercompany partner that we have, from Contoso Entertainment, or USMF is what we call it. If I go into this purchase order, what we can see is that there's a particular product for 5 pallets of this product that we need inside of this particular company. And if I click on my inventory button here, I can go to my transactions, and you can see that there's an intercompany aspect that's actually been highlighted here as well. And this happens on the general ledger, on sales, on purchases, pretty much anywhere in the system for intercompany. If I click on my transactions here, I want to stop and pause and just highlight a couple of things. First off, we've got a unit of measure conversion that occurred automatically based off of what USMF manufactures and what their unit of measure is. You can also see up here at USMF that the system has automatically gone through and then changed into our USMF company without me having to go through and make a change to represent where I'm at with that. What I can also do, though, is I can get back to the actual sales order that was generated inside of USMF as well to highlight, obviously, that when I created this purchase order, it automatically went through and generated this sales order in the other company without me having to interact with it. So this intercompany concept is very powerful and extends, like I said, everywhere inside of the system. And so one of the last things I wanted to show, and I'd love to do a deeper demo with you guys at some point as well. There's so much functionality to cover, but one of the areas I really wanted to highlight was a concept that we call organizational structures or organizational hierarchies. And the reason for that is when we go through an ERP implementation, a lot of systems are very static. Scott Bodingheimer, our VP of Sales, refers to it as digital concrete. When you set it up, it's really hard then to add cost centers or departments. And within Dynamics 365, that's not the case. I'm going to go through and search for my organizational hierarchies. And I just wanted to highlight the search because, you can search for different areas very quickly inside of the system. When I click on my organizational hierarchies, I want to go to my home business unit, and I just want to view that organizational hierarchy in the system. So there's a lot more detail that goes into this, obviously, but the intent of this is to show you there's a couple of different things that you can do as a business to set this system up so that if you're acquiring companies, if you're moving business units around, if you're changing departments or cost centers, you can very easily make these changes and have the historical information represented in all your reporting. So an example of this is my home business unit, and at the bottom down here you'll see that I've got an organizational type of business unit. If I click on my sales and marketing, we'll see that it changed to department. So there's different types of actual organization types that we can have inside of our system. What we can also see is that we have within a department, we have cost centers. And what we can do is we can actually go through and then edit this capability by going through and saying, we're going to move marketing into operations, for example. And we'll see that that then went into a different department for this particular cost center. So that way, if you had IT in different departments and you want to make a shared cost center for IT, you could theoretically move it around or put it at different hierarchies as well. Lastly, when you actually publish this, you can actually specify the effectivity date of this. So that way, when you're doing comparison reporting within Management Report or our financial reports, it knows that at this time, this department was under, or this cost center was under this department, and now moving forward, it's under this particular department. So this extends to legal entities. So if you want to look at like centralized AP payments, you can set up an organizational hierarchy to represent how that centralized AP processing should work, along with consolidations and pretty much the majority of the functionality within the actual application. So that kind of highlights just really at a high level the Dynamics 365 for operations capabilities inside of the solution. And like I said, I'd be more than happy to go deeper for your specific requirements in the future as well. I'm going to turn it back over to Eric, and we should be good to go. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So we've got just a few minutes left. I want to wrap up with a couple quick rundown of a few slides. One of the things that I put together, which I'll share here in just a second, is a comparison in the feature sets between the products, so you get a sense of where one potential solution is stronger versus another. So this guide here that's coming up in just a second kind of gives you a sense of where are the particular products stronger than others. So Dynamics GP is strong in a number of areas. HR and payroll is one area where they'd be stronger than the Dynamics 365 for financials, as well as project accounting. But then you've got Dynamics 365 for operations, where the majority of the investment is going, that has really strong capabilities across the board. So I'll post this as a blog article so you can see this information a little bit more. And certainly this whole session will be recorded, so you'll be able to see it there as well. But just real quick, I want to talk about some of the transition options that you have. So from Dynamics GP, you can transition to either Dynamics 365 options. So you can go to Dynamics 365 for business or financials, or you can go with the Dynamics 365 for operations and enterprise. And in each case, you can take advantage of transition pricing or take advantage of the system list price that you have with Dynamics GP today, which can be applied towards the Dynamics 365 for operations price. So if you're thinking about, I'm running to the end of the life on Dynamics GP, I need to make a move to another solution, you're at a significant advantage sticking with the Microsoft Dynamics platform. So Dynamics 365 for financial or operations are a much better deal than anything else you could get because of the transition and the investment that you're going to get credit for on the Dynamics side. So again, on Dynamics 365 for financials, you can stay current on your enhancement plan and buy an add-on, or you can actually transition your licenses for a discount, and you can pay less than the standard rate. As Rich mentioned, there is a data migration option out on AppSource. You would be able to actually move your accounts, beginning balances, customers, open balances, all of those things over to Dynamics 365 very quickly from Dynamics GP using this migration tool. And there's no cost for it. It's provided by Microsoft. On the Dynamics 365, if you're thinking of making the transition from GP to the operations side, again, you do a product line transition where you basically get the credit for your system list price that what you've paid for on Dynamics GP, convert that to AX licenses, and then again you either keep your enhancement and buy the cloud add-on if you're going to the online version, or you can just keep paying your enhancement if you want to stay on premise, or if you're going to move to online, you can transition your existing licenses for a discount on the online as well. So one other tool set that is an important part of Dynamics 365 for operations is Lifecycle Services, and that's a suite of tools that Microsoft provides that's cloud hosted, and it gives you the ability to integrate your system with core out-of-the-box processes like the Business Process Modeler, which is a little bit what Scott Verpeer showed with the task guide capability, but there's also data migration tools in here that allow you to build packages to import your data from Dynamics GP. This is also the solution you use to apply updates in Dynamics 365 for operations as well. So with that, apologize for running a little bit long here, but we wanted to make sure you had a good chance to see a lot of the functionality and see what you can do with Dynamics 365 for financials or Dynamics 365 for operations. So with that said, are there any questions that people would like to share with the group right now?
Thanks, Eric. And so please do enter any remaining questions into the Q&A block. I also want to just raise a little poll here just to get feedback from anyone who wants to let us know what you thought of today's event and whether you did want to follow up. Obviously, it's an optional poll, but you can fill it in now. And Eric, you've answered a lot of, you and the rest of the presenters here have answered a lot of questions. I see a couple others coming in.
Yeah, and one other thing to follow up on. So the question is, does operations have HR and payroll capability? The answer to that is yes, it does. It's got an extensive capability on the HR and payroll side, and Dynamics 365 for operations is actually going to be coming out with some new HR capability in the next month too. There was a question that Christy asked on there. So that will be a new enhancement that will make that processing and workflow process that HR folks go through a lot simpler in the new version. There was a question about the cost user per month. Obviously, Dynamics 365 for financials is at a very low price point at $40 a user a month for full users, whereas Dynamics 365 is at $190 a user a month. So that talks a little bit about the additional functionality capability that's in Dynamics 365 for operations. So depending on where your needs are from a capability standpoint, that's going to dictate whether financials or operations is the right choice for you. And there's another question about analytical accounting. So in Dynamics GP, there is analytical accounting, which allows you to really divide up your chart of accounts and to be able to assign information and to a certain department or a certain area. None of that is actually necessary in the Dynamics 365 for financials or operations because of the financial dimension capability. We didn't get a chance to show that today, but we'd be happy to show you how to do that. But basically, you can divide up you can do P&Ls by customer, by vendor, by department, by cost center, by employee, whatever you can think of, you can do it in Dynamics 365 with these financial capabilities. So the analytical accounting piece that's in Dynamics GP really isn't applicable because of the greater flexibility you have with your chart of accounts there in Dynamics 365. A question about mobile support. So Dynamics 365 for operations does have mobile support. So you can pull it up on a tablet, you can pull it up on your computer, and then there's a framework that Microsoft provides that allows you to quickly build without without any programming, custom mobile solutions, basically build forms that work on a phone. So the application will work on a phone. It's just that it is, pretty hard to read, but it does give you a framework to be able to build solutions without having to program them on a phone device as well. Power BI with lots of data doesn't scale. How does Power BI scale in the environment? So again, Power BI, that's a question that we can talk to a little bit more. Depending on the size of your data set, you want to put as much of that into Azure and use some of the machine learning capabilities to allow that to scale appropriately. But that's something that we'd be happy to follow up on if you have further questions about a specific area. Certainly, there are a couple projects that we've done with customers where we've done a data warehouse, so analytical cubes with Power BI. And in the case where you're really looking at an enterprise-sized database with multiple terabytes of data, your best solution would be to go with a data warehouse or a SQL Server Analysis Services type solution with Power BI as the user interface or the visual display. So we've got 2 projects going on right now with customers where we've done that kind of thing, where we didn't use Power BI for the data warehouse. We used it as the display mechanism. So that's a good question. Any other questions that folks have? Thank you for sending them out there, and hopefully I believe we've gotten a chance to get to all the questions. But if you have any follow-up questions, drop us a note at solutions@stoneridgesoftware.com. We've got a really extensive blog out at stoneridgesoftware.com/blog. So if you want to read more about this, we've got a ton of information out there. So I encourage you to go check that out.
Okay, well, yeah, a lot of great questions today. Thank you so much for those, and obviously to Eric, Scott, and Rich for taking so many of those. We are going to start wrapping up now. We have recorded today's event. We'll be sharing those in the next couple of days in terms of giving access. And yeah, with that, we are going to close out today's event. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.